The man in the mirror was a stranger. He was wearing a charcoal wool suit that felt both foreign and heavy on my shoulders, a uniform for a world I was about to enter as a tourist. The fluorescent lights of the department store changing room were unforgiving, highlighting the faint lines of worry around my eyes. This wasn't just a suit, it was an $850 statement. A statement that would live on my credit card statement for the next 3 months. A quiet testament to the importance of this night. Tonight, Corinne was officially being crowned. Her promotion to marketing director at Crestview Innovations wasn't just a step up. It was a launch into a new stratosphere, one she had been relentlessly climbing towards for years, with me holding the ladder steady beneath her. "You look very handsome, dear," a kindly elderly attendant said, her voice crinkling at the edges as she passed by the open door. I managed a tight smile, the muscles in my face feeling as stiff as the suit's collar. "Thank you. Special occasion. My wife's promotion party." "Well, she's a lucky woman," the attendant said before disappearing down the hall. Lucky. The word echoed in the small space. I smoothed the lapels one last time. Corinne had been dropping hints for years, subtle at first, then less so, about my wardrobe. "To accountant," she'd say with a playful sigh, a term she'd coined that meant practical, muted, and utterly devoid of the corporate gloss she was now draped in. Tonight, I was determined to shed that skin. Tonight, I would look the part. I would fit into her world, a world of sharp suits and sharper ambitions. The drive to the lakeside hotel was filled with a nervous energy that hummed in time with the engine. My mind drifted back to last week. Corinne had been at the kitchen table, her laptop casting a cool blue glow on her focused face as she reviewed her speech notes. "Want me to listen to you practice?" I'd asked, leaning against the counter. "That's sweet, Elliot, but unnecessary," she'd said, her eyes never leaving the screen. "It's just formalities, really. Thanking Leland and the executive team." I'd walked over and dropped a kiss on the crown of her head, inhaling the faint scent of her jasmine shampoo. "Don't forget to thank your amazing husband, who kept you fed and sane through the whole process." She'd offered a distracted, fleeting smile. "Of course," she'd murmured, her fingers already flying across the keyboard again. The words felt like a placeholder, an automatic response to a prompt she'd barely heard. The hotel ballroom was a sea of sound and light. Crystal chandeliers fractured the light into 1,000 tiny rainbows, casting a flattering, expensive glow over the crowd of marketing executives and their clients. It was a different language being spoken here, a dialect of market shares and quarterly projections that I only vaguely understood. I recognized a few faces from company picnics, awkward affairs where I usually ended up talking to the other spouses about anything but work. But tonight, this was Corinne's court, and I was merely a visitor. I spotted her immediately. It was impossible not to. Her honey blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, revealing the graceful line of her neck. She was wearing the deep sapphire dress we'd splurged on last weekend, a slash of brilliant color in a room of muted charcoals and navies. She was surrounded, a planet with her own gravitational pull, holding a circle of admirers in her orbit. They were laughing at something the CEO, Leland Kessler, a man with a mane of silver hair and a predatory smile, had just said. She looked radiant, powerful, and 1,000,000 miles away. Making my way to the bar felt like navigating a foreign port. I ordered a scotch on the rocks, the burn of the liquor, a welcome distraction. I would wait for her to notice me. She'd been too busy to come home before the event, going straight from a client meeting to the hotel to prepare with her team. "Saves me a step on the receiving line," she'd texted earlier. "Just come to the main event at 8. I checked my watch. 8:30. The ice in my glass was beginning to melt. Finally, across the crowded room, her eyes met mine. I raised my glass in a small private toast, a silent congratulations. She gave me the briefest of nods, a flicker of recognition, nothing more, before turning her attention back to Leland. The dismissal was so swift, so clean, it was like a paper cut. You don't feel it at first, and then it stings. "First time at one of these things?" the bartender asked, his voice low. He was polishing a glass, his movements economical and practiced. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, a wry smile failing to reach my eyes. "A little," he admitted. "Let me guess. Spouse of a Crestview employee." "That's right, my wife just got promoted to marketing director." I said the words with a surge of pride that felt strangely out of place, like wearing a winter coat in July. "Congratulations to her," he said, his expression neutral. "Let me know if you need another. These corporate gigs can be brutal for the plus ones. I was halfway through my second scotch when Leland Kessler tapped a knife against his champagne flute. The low hum of expensive conversations subsided, all eyes turning to the small podium at the front of the room. "Tonight," Leland began, his voice resonating with the easy authority of a man used to being listened to, "we celebrate not just an exceptional marketing professional, but a visionary who has transformed how Crestview connects with our clients." He went on, listing Corinne's achievements like battle honors. A 23% increase in market share, over 30 million in new accounts. A knot of pride tightened in my chest, pushing back against the earlier sting of her neglect. I had been there for all of it. I remembered the late nights when she'd paced our living room, workshopping pitch ideas, while I acted as her sounding board. I remembered the weekends she'd spent buried in market research, me serving as a one-man catering service, bringing endless cups of coffee and offering encouragement when her confidence wavered. Her success felt, in part, like my success. We were a team. "Without further ado," Leland boomed, "I am thrilled to officially announce Corinne Hayes as Crestview's new marketing director." The room erupted in applause. I clapped until my hands were numb. A wide, genuine smile plastered on my face. She stepped forward, a vision in sapphire blue, soaking in the adoration. She was magnificent. I beamed at my wife, even though she still hadn't looked my way. "Thank you, Leland, for this incredible opportunity," Corinne began, her voice steady and confident. It was the voice she used for boardrooms and clients, polished and perfect. "This promotion represents the culmination of countless hours of work and dedication, not just from me, but from an entire team of brilliant professionals." She went on, a master of corporate grace. She thanked Leland again for his mentorship. She thanked her direct supervisor, Diane, for her guidance. She named several team members individually, each of them beaming as their name hung in the air like a new constellation. She expressed her gratitude to the client representatives present. She even gave a special mention to Marta, the office manager, who kept the entire department from descending into chaos. The crowd chuckled appreciatively. I waited, my smile unwavering, my heart beating a little faster. The acknowledgement of the steadfast husband, the partner behind the scenes, was a standard part of these speeches. It was the humanizing touch, the moment that showed the corporate titan also had a heart. I was ready for it, but it never came. "In conclusion," Corinne said, her voice bright and final, "I am so excited to lead Crestview's marketing department into a new era of innovation and growth. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate with me." Another wave of applause washed over the room, and then she was surrounded again, engulfed by well-wishers and colleagues, eager to congratulate her. I stood frozen, my glass halfway to my lips. The smile on my face felt like it had been chiseled from ice. Had she forgotten? No. Corinne didn't forget things. She was meticulous, especially with speeches. She practiced them over and over, honing every word, every pause. This wasn't an oversight. This was an omission, a deliberate, calculated erasure. The sting was no longer a paper cut. It was a deep, gaping wound. I finished my drink in one long, searing swallow and began to make my way toward her, navigating through the clusters of chattering executives. When I finally reached the edge of the circle surrounding her, I caught her eye over the shoulder of a man in an impeccably tailored suit. It was Julian Croft, the potential client I'd seen her with earlier. For a split second, recognition flashed across Corinne's face. And then, something else. Something that made my stomach clench. Annoyance. A flicker of sheer irritation, as if my presence was an inconvenient detail she had to manage. She quickly turned her attention back to Julian, laughing at something he said and placing a light, familiar hand on his arm. She had seen me, acknowledged my existence, and then actively, deliberately looked away. "Ouch," a voice said beside me. "That was cold." "Huh." I turned to find a man about my age in a well-cut navy suit, watching the interaction with raised eyebrows. "You saw that?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Hard to miss," the man said, extending a hand. "Donovan Sterling. My wife's in accounting at Crestview." "Elliot Hayes," I replied, shaking his hand. My own felt clammy. "My wife is the guest of honor." Donovan's eyebrows shot up even further. "Really? Well, that's interesting." What do you mean, interesting?" He hesitated, glancing around as if checking for spies. Nothing. Just office politics. You know how it is. He cast a look back at Corinne, who was still completely engrossed in her conversation with Julian Croft, her head tilted at an intimate angle. She hadn't even glanced back to see if I was still there. The party swirled around me, a dizzying kaleidoscope of laughter and clinking glasses. But for me, the sound had been turned off. In a room full of people, under the brilliant light of a dozen chandeliers, I had never felt so utterly and completely invisible. I was a ghost at my own wife's celebration. Donovan Sterling's words hung in the air between us, a stark and unwelcome diagnosis. Interesting. He gave me a look that was part pity, part I've been there, brother solidarity, and clapped a hand on my shoulder before melting back into the crowd to find his wife. I was left alone again, anchored to my spot by the sheer weight of my wife's public dismissal. I should have left then. I should have turned on my heel, walked out of that suffocating ballroom, and driven straight home. But I couldn't. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I was horrified, but I couldn't look away. I needed to see how it ended. I retreated to the periphery, finding a small alcove near the coat check, partially hidden by an ostentatious floral arrangement. From here, I had a clear view of Corinne. She was still holding court, a dazzling sun in a bespoke solar system. She moved from one conversation to the next with the fluid, practiced ease of a politician, her laughter bright and perfectly modulated. Not once did she glance in my direction. Not once did her eyes scan the room, as if searching for someone who was missing. I wasn't missing. To her, I simply wasn't there. An hour bled into another. The crowd began to thin as the evening wound down. I was about to finally give up, to concede to my own invisibility, when I saw her near the entrance, standing with Julian Croft. He was helping her with her coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders a fraction of a second too long. "The London proposal is nearly ready," Julian was saying, his voice a low, confidential murmur that still carried in the cavernous lobby. "I just need to finalize a few details. Perhaps over dinner next week?" "I'd like that," Corinne replied, and her voice was different. It was warmer, infused with a promise that had nothing to do with marketing strategies. "The Westfield at 8? They have private dining rooms that are perfect for in-depth discussions." "It's a date," Julian said, his smile widening. His hand slid from her shoulder down her arm, his fingers giving her a light proprietary squeeze before he released her. Neither of them saw me standing just around the corner, my own coat already in hand, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Private dining rooms. It's a date. The words were a death knell. I didn't wait for her. I didn't say goodbye. There was no one to say goodbye to. The woman who was my wife, the woman I had built a life with, was a stranger who had just made a date with another man in front of me. I walked out through the grand gilded doors, the cold night air a shocking slap to the face. The valet brought my car, and I drove away from the glittering hotel, leaving Corinne's triumph behind me. The drive home was a silent film. The city lights smeared past the windows, streaks of meaningless color. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the frantic, chaotic monologue screaming inside my own head. The expensive suit felt like a clown's costume now, a pathetic attempt to belong in a world that had so thoroughly rejected me. Our apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt alien. Every object, the minimalist sofa we'd picked out together, the abstract painting she loved that I secretly hated, the stack of her business magazines on the coffee table seemed to mock me. It was her space. I was just a resident. I sat on the cold leather couch in the dark living room, not bothering to turn on a single light. I sat there for hours, the scotch I'd drunk at the party long since worn off, leaving behind a residue of sour anger. I tried to make sense of it, to find a rational explanation. Was this who she had always been, and I was just too blind with love to see it? Or had success fundamentally changed her, carving away the person I knew and leaving this cold, ambitious stranger in her place? The silence of the apartment offered no answers. It was almost 1 a.m. when the key turned in the lock. The door opened, and light from the hallway spilled into the room. Corinne stepped inside, flipping on the entryway light, and she startled when she saw my silhouette on the couch. I had changed out of the suit. I was back in my own clothes, a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, my discarded uniform a charcoal heap on a nearby chair. "Elliot, you're still up," she said. Her voice was laced with exhaustion, not concern. She didn't quite meet my eyes as she set down her purse and the sleek leather portfolio she carried everywhere. "We need to talk about what happened tonight," I said. My voice was eerily steady, a calm surface on a churning ocean of hurt and rage. She sighed, a long, weary sound, as she kicked off her high heels. "Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm exhausted. It was a long night." "No," I said, the single word sharp enough to cut through her fatigue. "It can't wait. You treated me like a stranger tonight, Corinne. Worse than a stranger. At least you acknowledged the waitstaff." "You're being dramatic," she said, dismissing my feelings as she moved into the kitchen, the open plan layout offering no escape from the conversation. She opened the fridge and poured herself a glass of water. "Am I?" I stood up and followed her, stopping at the edge of the kitchen island. "A work event where you thanked literally everyone in the building except your own husband? Where you deliberately avoided me all night? Where you made plans for a dinner date with Julian Croft?" Her head snapped up at the mention of his name, her eyes finally locking onto mine. There was a flicker of something: guilt, fear, before the defensive mask slammed back into place. "You were eavesdropping on me?" "I was standing 3 feet away, Corinne. You were just too absorbed in Brighton to notice anything else." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the cool marble of the countertop. "Is there something going on between you two?" "That's ridiculous," she scoffed, but a faint flush crept up her neck, a tell I knew all too well. "Julian is a potential major client. Of course I'm going to give him special attention." "Special attention?" I repeated the words, my voice flat and dead. "Is that what we're calling it now? Private dining rooms for in-depth discussions?" She slammed her glass down on the counter, the sound cracking the silence. "What exactly are you accusing me of, Elliot?" "I don't know, Corinne. You tell me. Because from where I was standing tonight alone, by the way, it looked like you were embarrassed to be seen with me. Like I was some inconvenient attachment you'd rather people didn't know about." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine, unable to hold my gaze. Her lie was as transparent as the glass of water she'd just abandoned. "I was just focused on work," she insisted, her voice gaining a defensive edge. "On making connections that matter for my career." The casual cruelty of that statement, the implication that our marriage, didn't matter, hit me like a physical blow. It knocked the air from my lungs. "Donovan Sterling's wife works in your accounting department," I said quietly. Corinne stiffened. "You were talking to Donovan Sterling about me?" "He approached me, actually. Seemed to think it was strange that my own wife was ignoring me at her own promotion party. He called it cold." "Donovan Sterling is a gossip who's jealous his wife hasn't advanced as quickly as I have," she said dismissively, waving a hand as if to physically bat away his opinion. "You shouldn't listen to anything he says. He mentioned you've been having a lot of late dinners with Julian." "Of course I have. He represents a potential 7-figure account." She threw her hands up in exasperation. "This is exactly why I hate mixing my work and personal lives. You don't understand how business relationships work in my industry." "I understand plenty," I countered, my voice rising for the first time. I pushed away from the counter, my calm facade finally cracking. "I understand that you used to call me when you were running late. I understand that you used to talk about your clients with me, like we were partners. I understand that you used to act like we were a team, not like I was some inconvenient detail you needed to manage." Her expression softened for a fraction of a second. "Look, I know I've been distracted lately. This promotion has been all-consuming, but things will settle down now, I promise." "And will they?" I asked, the question laced with a bitterness that surprised even me. "Because tonight felt like a preview of our future. Me standing alone at parties while you pretend I don't exist. Me waiting up at night while you have client dinners with men who look at you the way Julian Croft does." "Nothing is happening with Julian," she insisted. "And yes, I should have mentioned you in my speech. I'm sorry about that. It was an oversight, that's all." An oversight. The word was so small, so inadequate for the chasm that had just opened up between us. "An oversight," I repeated slowly. "Like forgetting to buy milk. Except you thanked the office manager, Corinne, by name. But your husband of 6 years didn't even rate a mention." She ran a hand through her hair, disheveling the perfect updo. "What do you want me to say, Elliot? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. Can we please just go to bed now and talk about this tomorrow when we're both less emotional?" No. The word was out before I had even consciously thought it. It was firm, resolute. "No, we can't. Because this isn't just about tonight. This is about patterns. About the fact that I've become background noise in your life. Useful for keeping the apartment running and listening to your work problems, but not important enough to acknowledge publicly. That's not fair, she protested, but a flicker of guilt in her eyes told me I'd struck a nerve. Let me ask you something, I said, taking a step closer. When was the last time you asked me about my day, about my job, about anything in my life that doesn't directly relate to supporting yours? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, damning in its emptiness. That's what I thought, I said quietly. The decision, which had been crystallizing since I'd walked out of the hotel, was now solid. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. I'm going to stay at Reese's for a while. I need some space to think. You're leaving? Her voice rose in disbelief, cracking on the word. Because I didn't thank you in a speech? No. I moved past her, walking with a strange sense of purpose towards our bedroom. I'm leaving because tonight made me realize that our marriage has become completely one-sided, and I deserve better than that. I pulled a duffel bag from the top of the closet and methodically began filling it with clothes, toiletries, essentials. I moved like an automaton, each action deliberate and detached. Corinne followed, watching from the doorway, her arms crossed, a look of growing alarm on her face. Paul, this is ridiculous. You can't just leave in the middle of the night because you're feeling underappreciated. Watch me, I replied without looking at her, zipping the bag closed. What am I supposed to tell people? That my husband threw a tantrum and walked out on the night of my greatest professional achievement? Her question was all about her, about appearances. It confirmed everything. I shouldered my bag and turned to face her. Tell them whatever you want, Corinne. You're good at pretending I don't exist anyway. The words landed like a slap. I saw the shock register on her face, the genuine hurt. For the first time all night, I think she understood this was real. I'll call you when I've had some time to think, I said, my voice softer now, tired. I moved past her, towards the front door. Elliot, wait. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Please, don't do this, not tonight. This is supposed to be a celebration. That's the problem, Corinne, I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. It's always about what's convenient for you. For once, I'm putting myself first. With that, I walked out. I didn't look back. I closed the door firmly behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the hallway. It was a sound of finality, cutting off her protest, her world, and the life I had known. Behind that door was a suffocating silence, and for the first time in a very long time, I was on the other side of it, breathing free. The 30-minute drive to my brother's house on the outskirts of the city was a blur of autopilot and adrenaline. My hands were gripping the leather steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. Each red light was a welcome pause, a moment to breathe before plunging back into the silent, rushing darkness. I wasn't thinking, not really. I was just moving, putting distance between myself and the echo of that closing door. Reese lived in a small, unassuming bungalow he was perpetually in the process of renovating. Despite the late hour, a single light burned in the living room window, a beacon in the quiet suburban night. I parked at the curb, the engine's silence suddenly deafening, and walked up the cracked concrete path. I knocked twice, the sound unnaturally loud. The door swung open almost immediately. Reese stood there in a faded t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, his hair sleep mussed. He blinked at me, his expression shifting from drowsy confusion to sharp-eyed alertness in a single heartbeat. He didn't ask what I was doing there. He just looked at my face, then at the duffel bag slung over my shoulder. What happened? He asked, his voice low and serious as he stepped aside, ushering me into the warmth of his home. The question cracked the dam of my composure. My marriage might be over, I said, the words feeling strange and hollow in my own mouth, like a line from a play I hadn't rehearsed. Reese didn't press for details. He didn't offer platitudes or ask 100 questions. He just nodded, his jaw tight with a shared unspoken anger on my behalf. He took the duffel bag from my shoulder, pointed me towards the living room, and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned a moment later with 2 bottles of beer, condensation tracing lines down the dark glass. He handed one to me and gestured to the guest room. It's all yours, he said simply, as long as you need. We sat in his cluttered kitchen until 3 in the morning, the room smelling of sawdust and coffee grounds. I talked, and for the first time in what felt like years, someone truly listened. I recounted the whole humiliating evening, from the hopeful anticipation in the changing room to the crushing finality of her speech. I described the brief, dismissive nod across the ballroom, the cold annoyance in her eyes when I approached her, the poisonous whisper of her dinner plans with Julian Croft. I told him about the confrontation in our kitchen, about her accusations of me being dramatic, about her casual, cruel admission that I wasn't a connection that mattered. With every word, Reese's expression grew darker. She seriously pretended not to see you? Her own husband? Multiple times? He asked, his voice a low growl of disbelief. And then got annoyed when I called her on it, I confirmed, taking a long pull of my beer. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. That's messed up, Elliot. Completely messed up. His validation was a balm on a raw wound. It was the antidote to Corinne's gaslighting. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't being overly sensitive. My pain was real, and it was justified. And this Croft guy, Reese continued, leaning forward on his elbows. You think something's actually going on there? I don't know, I admitted, the truth of it aching in my chest. Maybe not yet, but the potential is there. The door is wide open. The thing is, even if there's nothing physical happening with him, the way she treated me tonight, it was still wrong. It was fundamentally disrespectful. Damn straight it was, Reese agreed, his loyalty an unshakable wall at my back. You stay here. You take your time. You figure things out. The next few days passed in a strange, muted haze. My phone became a source of constant anxiety. It buzzed and chimed with a relentless barrage of messages from Corinne. The first ones, on that first morning, were tinged with anger and disbelief. This is childish and unnecessary, Elliot. Come home so we can talk about this like adults. When I didn't respond, the tone began to shift. The anger morphed into a kind of frustrated confusion. I don't understand why you're doing this. Are you really going to throw everything away over one bad night? By the second day, a note of pleading had crept in. Elliot, please answer me. The apartment feels so empty. I can't sleep. Just let me know you're okay. I read each message and then turned my phone face down on the nightstand, the screen a dark, silent mirror. I called my supervisor, Dave, and requested a few personal days, something I rarely did. He was surprisingly understanding, his voice kind. Take whatever time you need, Elliot. Family first. The irony was bitter. To keep my mind from spiraling, I threw myself into Reese's latest project, a complete gut renovation of his main bathroom. The work was hard, physical, and deeply satisfying. We tore out the old, cracked tiles, demolished the stained vanity, and ripped the drywall down to the studs. There was a brutal catharsis in the destruction. Every swing of the sledgehammer felt like I was breaking down the walls of my own quiet resentment. The dust filled my lungs, the sweat stung my eyes, and the ache in my muscles at the end of the day was a clean, honest pain. It was a pain I could understand, a pain I had earned. It was so different from the murky, insidious ache Corinne had left in my soul. I was tearing out something old and rotten to make way for a new foundation. The metaphor was not lost on me. On the second day of my self-imposed exile, a Saturday, I couldn't stand the idleness any longer. Reese had gone out to meet friends, and the quiet house felt too much like my empty apartment. I needed a distraction, a sense of normalcy. I drove to my office. The building was quiet on the weekend, a hushed sanctuary of order and predictability. It was my space, a place where I was competent and respected. I could lose myself in spreadsheets and reports, the clean logic of numbers a soothing balm for my chaotic emotions. I was deep into reconciling a complex account. The world narrowed to the numbers on my screen when a familiar voice shattered my concentration. I thought I might find you here. I looked up, my heart giving a painful lurch. Corinne was standing by the entrance to my cubicle. She was perfectly composed, dressed in designer jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine, and I, in my worn-out jeans and a t-shirt that probably had drywall dust on it, had never felt more like her accountant husband. How did you know I'd be here? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. A small, sad smile touched her lips. You always come to the office when you're upset. It's your safe space. The fact that she knew this detail about me, a small, intimate piece of my psychology that I hadn't been sure she'd ever noticed, was both surprising and confusing. It was a flicker of the old Corinne, the woman who knew me. "What do you want, Linda?" I asked, deliberately using her name. It felt more formal, more distant. "I want you to come home," she said directly. "This has gone on long enough." I glanced around the empty office floor. The few colleagues who were in were studiously pretending not to listen, their heads bent over their keyboards. "Let's talk outside," I suggested, my voice low. I rose and led the way to the small, sterile courtyard behind the building, a sad little patch of green surrounded by concrete. Once we were alone, sitting on a cold stone bench, she crossed her arms defensively. "This is ridiculous, Elliot. You've made your point. I apologize for not mentioning you in my speech. Now, can we please move past this?" Her dismissive tone, the way she minimized everything down to a single mistake, reignited the cold fire of my anger. "This isn't just about the speech, Corinne. Do you really not get that? It's about how you treated me the entire night. It's about how you've been treating me for months." "I was working," she protested, her voice sharp. "That event was a crucial networking opportunity for me. The connections I made that night could shape the next 5 years of my career." "And I'm what?" I shot back, my voice quiet but shaking with intensity. "Just an inconvenient attachment? Something to be hidden away when you're with the important people in your life?" She had the grace to look slightly ashamed, her eyes dropping to the concrete at her feet. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I pressed on. "You know how important this promotion is to me," she said, her gaze lifting to meet mine, pleading. "To us. I needed to present a certain image. And that image doesn't include a husband who's—" I let the sentence hang in the air, a silent, damning accusation. She couldn't finish it. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to find the words that wouldn't confirm my deepest fear. Her silence was the loudest confession she could have possibly made. "Just an accountant," I finished for her, my voice barely a whisper. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "That's what this is all about, isn't it?" Her silence was her answer. That was it. The ugly, unvarnished truth, finally laid bare in the cold Saturday air. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "You know, it's funny. When I was promoted to senior accountant a few years ago, the very first person I thanked in my little office party speech was you. I even made a joke about how you were the brains of the operation. You couldn't even make it to the party, by the way. You had a client meeting you said you couldn't miss." "That's different," she said weakly. "Why?" I demanded, leaning towards her. "Why is it different, Corinne? Because your career matters more than mine? Because your accomplishments are worthy of public recognition, while my contributions are just expected? The silent, invisible support system that's supposed to run in the background without ever needing a thank you?" She trailed off, flustered and cornered, unable to complete a thought without digging herself into a deeper hole. She had no defense because I was right. I had been doing a lot of thinking these past 2 days, sitting in Reese's dusty, half-finished house. I had been thinking about balance, about partnership, about what I wanted from a marriage. And looking at her now, seeing the uncomfortable truth written all over her face, the path forward became painfully clear. I stood up from the bench. "Thank you," I said quietly. She looked up at me, confused. "For what?" "For making my decision easier." I saw the understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by a wave of panic. "Elliot, I'll be by next week to pick up more of my things," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I was looking at her, but I was seeing past her, to a future that I needed to build for myself. "Please be at work when I come." "You're seriously doing this?" Her voice held a note of genuine disbelief. "You're throwing away 6 years of marriage because of one bad night?" "No," I corrected her, turning to leave. "I'm recognizing that the marriage I thought we had hasn't existed for a long time, and I'm choosing to stop pretending otherwise." I walked away, leaving her sitting alone on that cold stone bench in the empty courtyard. I didn't look back. I felt her eyes on me, but I didn't turn around. I was walking away from the demolition site of my marriage, and for the first time, I felt the solid, reassuring ground of a new foundation under my feet. It was a foundation of self-respect. The week that followed was a masterclass in compartmentalization. At work, I was the model of efficiency. I built spreadsheets with the precision of an architect, answered emails with crisp professionalism, and sat through meetings with a placid, impenetrable expression. I was Elliot Hayes, senior accountant, a man of numbers and logic. But the moment I got into my car to drive to Reese's house, that facade would crumble, leaving behind Elliot Hayes, the man whose life had just been shattered. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake in the unfamiliar guest room, the scent of fresh paint and wood stain filling the air, and my mind would race. I'd replay the party, the speech, the confrontation, searching for clues I had missed, for warning signs I had ignored. Had she always seen me this way? Was I a fool for not realizing it sooner? The questions were a relentless, tormenting loop. Reese was a rock. He didn't offer easy advice or try to cheer me up. A just existed alongside my grief, a quiet, steady presence. He'd leave a plate of dinner for me in the microwave when I worked late, and we'd watch sports on TV in comfortable silence, the roar of the crowd a welcome substitute for conversation. His unspoken support was more valuable than any words could have been. On Wednesday, I did something I had never done before. I found a therapist. I'd always thought of therapy as something for other people, for those with deep, dramatic traumas. My life was simple, uncomplicated, or so I had thought. My first session with Dr. Anya Sharma was like lancing a wound. I sat in her calm, minimalist office and talked for 50 minutes straight, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of pain and confusion. She didn't offer solutions, she just listened, her intelligent eyes holding mine, making me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a very long time. I left her office feeling emotionally drained but oddly lighter, as if I had offloaded a fraction of the immense weight I was carrying. As the week drew to a close, Corinne's messages, which had slowed to a trickle after our encounter in the courtyard, began to escalate again. They were shorter now, laced with a desperation that was starting to feel real. "Elliot, please, I miss you. This is a mistake." I continued to ignore them. I had told her I needed space, and I was determined to take it. On Friday evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from her. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. New voicemail. For some reason, I pressed play. Her voice filled the quiet of my car, and it was different. It wasn't angry or defensive. It was raw, stripped of all its corporate polish. It was shaky. "Elliot, please," she began, and I could hear the catch in her throat. "I miss you. The apartment, it's just a place without you. It feels so empty. I know I messed up. I know it wasn't just the party. I've been a terrible partner. Please, just come home so we can talk. Properly. No excuses, no justifications. I'll take a day off work. Hell, I'll take a week off if that's what you need. Just, please don't give up on us without a real conversation. Please don't let that night be the end of everything." She was crying by the end. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, ragged sound of someone trying and failing to hold themselves together. I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly. It was the first time I had heard genuine, unqualified remorse in her voice. The first time she had acknowledged the depth of the problem without trying to minimize it. I spent the weekend wrestling with that voicemail. I played it for Reese, who just grunted and said, "Sounds like she finally gets it. What are you going to do?" I talked about it with Dr. Sharma in my next session. "She seems to be taking a step towards accountability," Dr. Sharma observed. "But the decision to engage is entirely yours. What do you need right now?" What I needed was to not feel like I was caving. What I needed was to maintain the self-respect I had fought so hard to reclaim. But I also knew deep down that Corinne was right. Our marriage, however broken, deserved more than to die in the sterile courtyard of my office building. I sent her a short, direct text. "I'll meet you, Sunday, 2 p.m., the Grind Coffee Shop on Miller Avenue Neutral Ground." Her reply was instantaneous. "Thank you, I'll be there." The Grind was a place we had no history with, a blandly decorated cafe halfway between Reese's house and our apartment. I chose it for that very reason. It was a blank slate. I arrived a few minutes early, my heart hammering against my ribs. She was already there, seated at a small corner table, as if she had been waiting for hours. She looked tired. The impeccable corporate armor was gone. She was wearing a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. There were dark circles under her eyes that a concealer couldn't quite hide. She looked more like the Corinne I had first fallen in love with than the polished executive she had become. When she saw me, Her expression was a fragile mixture of hope and fear. "I got your usual," she said as I sat down, her voice soft. A mug of black coffee with a single packet of sugar on the saucer was waiting for me. "Black, 1 sugar." "Thanks," I replied, my own voice tight. I didn't immediately drink it. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. She was the one who broke it. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her hands wrapped around her latte as if for warmth. "I know you probably didn't want to. I think we need closure, one way or another," I said simply. She flinched at the word closure. "Is that what this is?" "That depends on you," I replied, my gaze steady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week, and I've realized something important. I don't want to be in a marriage where I'm an afterthought, where I have to beg for basic respect and acknowledgement." "I do respect you," she protested, the old defensiveness flaring for a moment. "Actions speak louder than words, Corinne," I countered calmly. "And your actions lately have shown that you see me as an accessory to your life, not as an equal partner in it." She fell quiet, stirring her latte absently, her eyes fixed on the swirling foam. When she finally looked up, her expression was different. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by a profound weariness, a deep-seated sadness. "I've been doing some thinking too," she said, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. "About why I acted the way I did at the party, about what's been happening to us." "And what conclusions did you reach?" I asked, my curiosity piqued despite myself. She took a deep breath. "That I've been scared," she admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "Terrified, actually, of not being taken seriously, of being seen as someone who got where she is because of connections or luck, rather than hard work and talent." The confession hung in the air between us. I waited, letting her continue. "And being seen with me would somehow diminish you," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "No. Well, not exactly." She struggled to articulate her thoughts. "It's more, I've been trying so hard to project this image. Confident, independent, entirely self-made. And I was afraid that if I publicly acknowledged how much support I've had from you, how much I rely on you, it would somehow make my accomplishments seem less mine." "So you erased me," I said quietly. "You pretended I didn't exist." "Yes," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, and it was wrong. So wrong. I see that now." She reached a hand across the table, not quite touching mine, but leaving it there, an offering. "What I did hurt you deeply, and I am truly, truly sorry for that." The apology, so direct and unadorned, landed with a sincerity the others had lacked. "What about Julian Croft?" I asked, the question I needed an answer to. She didn't flinch. She met my gaze directly. "Nothing has happened between us," she said. Then she added, before I could speak, "But I can't honestly say nothing would have happened if things had continued on the path we were on. There was an attraction, an energy. He made me feel powerful, desired, important. And I finished, the words coming out more vulnerable than I intended. "No," she said, and her voice was firm, unequivocal. "You made me feel loved. But somewhere along the way, I started valuing the wrong things." We sat in silence for a moment, both absorbing the weight of her admission. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. "I canceled the dinner with Julian," she continued, "and I've requested that Diane, my supervisor, handle the Croft account moving forward." I was genuinely surprised. That was a significant step, a potential risk to a major client relationship. "That's a big deal," I acknowledged. "It's the right thing to do," she said. "I've also spoken with Leland about restructuring my role to reduce the travel and late nights. He was surprisingly supportive, said he'd seen too many executives burn out by sacrificing their personal lives." Ugh. These were all positive changes, tangible actions, not just empty words, but a week of good intentions couldn't erase years of neglect. "They are," she agreed, seeming to read my mind, "but I know they're not enough on their own to fix what's broken between us." She took another deep breath, as if bracing herself. "That's why I have a proposal." I raised an eyebrow. "A proposal?" "A 3-month trial period," she said, laying it out with the precision of a marketing plan. "We continue living separately, but we both commit to weekly couples counseling, and we have structured time together. 1 dedicated date night a week, no work talk allowed. One shared activity on the weekend. We rebuild from the ground up, intentionally. And if after 3 months, one or both of us decides it isn't working? I asked, testing the framework. Her voice caught slightly on the word, but she didn't waver. Then we moved forward with a separation and divorce, knowing we truly tried. I considered it. I'd expected her to beg, to plead, to demand my immediate return. I'd expected her to try and smooth things over with grand romantic gestures. This was different. This was measured, realistic, and it acknowledged the depth of the damage that had been done. It put us on equal footing. It wasn't a surrender, it was a negotiation. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the corporate titan or the neglectful wife, but a woman who was scared of losing her marriage and was willing to do the slow, hard, unglamorous work to try and save it. I picked up my coffee mug. The coffee was lukewarm now, but I took a sip. 3 months, I agreed, my voice steady. Starting with a counseling session this week, if we can get an appointment. The relief that flooded her face was so profound, it was almost painful to watch. Thank you, she whispered, her hand finally closing over mine on the table. Her fingers were cold. I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I won't waste it. I returned the pressure of her fingers, a small, tentative gesture of connection. I should be clear, Corinne, I said, meeting her tear-filled eyes. This isn't a promise that we'll reconcile. It's a promise to honestly try. That's all I'm asking for, she assured me. As we sat there, working out the logistics of our 3-month plan, a strange sense of calm settled over me. It wasn't the blind optimism of our early relationship, nor was it the despair of the past week. It was something new. It was the quiet certainty of a man who knew his own worth and was no longer willing to accept less than he deserved. Our marriage was on probation, and whether it survived or not, one thing was clear. The negotiation had begun, and I was finally an equal partner at the table. Our first counseling session was as uncomfortable as a first date where you suspect you're being interviewed for a job you don't want. We sat on opposite ends of a plush gray sofa in Dr. Palsanemi Sharma's office, a landscape of neutral-toned throw pillows between us. The air was thick with a week's worth of unspoken anxieties. Dr. Sharma, who I had agreed could act as our joint therapist to save time, didn't waste time on pleasantries. She dove straight in, her approach both compassionate and surgically precise. Elliot, you described feeling invisible. Corinne, you described a fear of your success being diminished. Let's start there. For the next hour, we talked. Or rather, we stumbled through a minefield of carefully worded statements. I spoke about the years of feeling like a supporting character in the movie of her life. She spoke about the immense pressure she felt in a male-dominated industry, the constant need to project an aura of unassailable competence. It was raw, and it was painful. There were no easy resolutions, no magical breakthroughs. But for the first time, we were having the conversation in front of a neutral referee, one who could call out a foul when one of us retreated into blame or defensiveness. By the end of the session, we had homework. Dr. Sharma tasked Corinne with writing a list of specific ways my support had enhanced rather than diminished her accomplishments. She tasked me with identifying times when I might have subconsciously downplayed my own needs or ambitions to avoid conflict or prioritize hers. We left the office in a cloud of strained silence, the emotional weight of the session settling heavily upon us. That first week set the tone for a new, highly structured rhythm. Tuesday evenings were for therapy, an hour of emotional excavation that often left us both drained. Friday nights became our sacred, non-negotiable date nights. The first one was painfully awkward. We went to a restaurant neither of us had been to before, and the conversation was stilted, full of safe topics like the weather and a new show on Netflix. It felt less like a date and more like two strangers attempting to find common ground. But we kept at it. We treated it like a commitment, a project we were both invested in. The second Friday, we went bowling. The sheer ridiculousness of it, the ugly shoes, the gutter balls, the cheap beer, it chipped away at the formality. I saw a flash of the old Corinne, the one who could laugh at herself when she sent a ball careening into the wrong lane. On the third Friday, we took a cooking class. We fumbled through making fresh pasta, our hands dusted with flour, and for a few hours, we weren't a broken couple in therapy. We were just two people learning how to fold tortellini, occasionally bumping elbows and sharing a smile. The silence between us was no longer heavy with resentment, but filled with the companionable sounds of chopping and simmering. Sundays were for shared activities, a deliberate effort to rebuild a foundation of shared experiences that had eroded over time. We went hiking on trails we hadn't visited since the early days of our relationship. We wandered through art museums, rediscovering a shared love for impressionist paintings. We were rebuilding, not just our relationship, but our friendship. It was slow, painstaking work, like assembling a piece of furniture with 1,000 tiny parts and instructions written in a foreign language. About 3 weeks into our trial period, something unexpected happened. I received an email that made me sit up straight in my cubicle. It was from a man named Arthur Harrington, a well-respected figure in the city's financial sector. He was starting a new consulting firm, Harrington Consulting, specializing in financial services for nonprofit organizations. He had gotten my name from a former colleague and was impressed with my work. He wanted to know if I would be interested in discussing a senior position. The work was everything I was passionate about, using my skills with numbers to help organizations that were doing meaningful work in the world. It was a dream I had mentioned to Corinne years ago, a someday ambition that had been shelved in the face of our more immediate, practical life. I was hesitant to even bring it up with her. It felt like my thing, separate from the fragile ecosystem we were trying to nurture. But the new rules of our engagement demanded transparency. During our Friday date night, over plates of Thai food, I told her about the offer. I expected a lukewarm, supportive but distracted response. Instead, her fork clattered onto her plate. She looked at me, her eyes wide and genuinely excited. "You should take it," she said immediately, her voice full of conviction. "Elliot, you have to take it." I was taken aback. "It's a new firm. It's a risk." "It's your passion," she countered. "You've always been interested in nonprofit work. You light up when you talk about it." "You remember that?" I asked, genuinely touched that she had retained this detail about my professional interests through the haze of her own relentless ambition. "Of course I do," she replied softly. "You talked about it when we first met, about how you wanted your accounting skills to contribute to something meaningful, not just a corporation's bottom line." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You deserve to do something that makes you happy. I'll support you, whatever you decide." In that moment, I felt a seismic shift. This wasn't the Corinne who saw my job as a footnote to hers. This was a partner, actively championing my dreams. The next week, I accepted the position with Harrington Consulting. 2 months into our separation, it was Corinne's turn for a career crossroads. The promotion she was offered was a big one: Executive Vice President of Marketing. It was the next logical step on her meteoric trajectory, a position that would mean more responsibility, higher pay, and crucially more travel and longer hours. It was the kind of offer the old Corinne would have accepted without a second thought. She brought it up during our Tuesday counseling session. She laid out the offer on the table, not as a done deal, but as a problem for us to solve. "I wanted to discuss it with you before making any decisions," she said, looking first at me, then at Dr. Sharma. "This affects both of us, not just me." I felt a surge of appreciation so strong it almost stole my breath. It was such a simple acknowledgement, yet it was the polar opposite of how she had handled her last promotion. It was the ultimate proof of change. "How do you feel about it, Elliot?" Dr. Sharma asked, turning to me. "I'm incredibly proud of her," I said honestly. "She's earned it, but I'm also worried about what it means for us, for the balance we're trying to find." "I'm worried too," Corinne admitted, "which is why I told Leland I would only consider it under certain conditions." She pulled out a notebook, and I realized she had prepared for this conversation like a business meeting. I proposed a restructured role. I get a dedicated deputy director to handle the bulk of the domestic travel. I get a hard stop time of 6:30 p.m., 3 nights a week. And my international travel is capped at 4 trips per year, planned at least 3 months in advance. She had drawn up new blueprints for her career, blueprints that had a space clearly marked out for me, for us. "I'll only take it if we can find a structure that works for us," she said firmly, looking directly at me. "No more one-sided decisions." As we neared the end of our 3-month trial, I realized something profound. I was no longer dreading my time with her. I was looking forward to it. The anxiety had been replaced by a quiet, hopeful curiosity about where this was all going. She had made genuine, consistent efforts to change her behavior, not just in grand gestures like restructuring a job offer, but in small daily ways that reflected a fundamental shift in her priorities. She'd started asking me about my day at Harrington Consulting, listening with real interest as I talked about the challenges of setting up financial systems for a new women's shelter. She had started seeing my world as being just as valid and important as her own. For the final, official date of our trial period, she had an idea. "Let's go back to Rossi's," she said, "where we had our first date." Rossi's was a small, unpretentious Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in old Chianti bottles. It was a relic from a simpler time in our lives. "I can't believe they're still in business," I remarked as we were seated at a cozy corner table. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I may have been coming here for lunch occasionally," she admitted, keeping them afloat single-handedly. We ordered the same meals we'd had on that first date 10 years ago, spaghetti carbonara for her, lasagna for me, and reminisced about the early days of our relationship, a time before ambition had become a wedge between us. The conversation was easy, comfortable, familiar. It felt less like a test and more like a homecoming. As we finished our wine, she grew serious. "I've been thinking about next steps," she said, her hands folded on the table. "About what happens after tonight." "And what have you concluded?" I asked, my heart beating a little faster. She met my eyes directly, her gaze clear and unwavering. "That I want to continue rebuilding what we had, or rather, building something better than what we had." She took a breath. "I want you to come home, Elliot. Not because everything is fixed, but because I believe we can only truly heal this rift by living our daily lives together, by practicing the lessons we've learned day in and day out." And I considered her words carefully. The past 3 months had shown me that she was capable of meaningful change. Not perfect, not complete, but genuine and consistent. The new blueprints she had drawn for her life, for our life, were solid. "I want to come home too," I said finally. The words felt right, but with conditions. "Name them," she said immediately, without a hint of hesitation. And so, over the remnants of our dinner, we designed the final blueprint. We would continue counseling, at least monthly. We would maintain our date nights and weekend activities, barring genuine emergencies. And, most importantly, if either of us felt the old patterns returning, we would address it immediately, not months down the road. It was a blueprint for a partnership, built on the foundations of communication and mutual respect. It was a blueprint for something built to last. Moving my things back into the apartment was a surreal experience. It was the same space, filled with the same furniture, but the emotional architecture had been entirely redesigned. The silence that had once felt heavy and suffocating was now calm and peaceful. We moved around each other in the familiar choreography of a long-term couple, unpacking my duffel bags, finding space for my things in closets and drawers that felt strangely empty without them. It wasn't a triumphant return celebrated with champagne and fireworks. It was quiet, tentative, and deeply intentional. It felt like coming home. We fell into the rhythm of our new agreement. The monthly counseling sessions became our regular maintenance, a space to check in and ensure small resentments weren't being allowed to fester. Our date nights remained sacred, protected from the encroachment of work calls and late-night emails. My new job at Harrington Consulting was both challenging and incredibly fulfilling. For the first time, my work felt aligned with my values, and I came home energized rather than drained. Corinne, true to her word, held firm to the new boundaries she had set at work. She left the office at 6:30, delegating with a trust she'd never had before, and her travel schedule was planned and predictable. We were two separate, complete individuals again, with our own ambitions and passions, but our lives were now intentionally intertwined, running parallel instead of destined to collide. About 3 weeks after I moved back in, we faced our first real test. Harrington Consulting was co-sponsoring a large charity gala, and Crestview Innovations was another major sponsor. It meant another night of sharp suits and corporate schmoozing, a scenario that was uncomfortably reminiscent of the party that had shattered our marriage. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. "Hey," Corinne's voice came from the doorway. She was wearing a simple, elegant black gown, her hair down. She looked beautiful, but her eyes were focused only on me, a soft concern in their depths. "Are you okay with this?" "I'm okay," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. A little nervous, maybe. "Me too," she admitted, She walked over and straightened my tie, her fingers warm and gentle. Tonight, we stick together. Team Hayes. No man left behind. Deal, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. The difference between this night and her promotion party was night and day. From the moment we walked in, she kept me by her side. When people approached her, she didn't just introduce me, she included me. "Leland, so good to see you," she'd say, taking the CEO's hand. "I'd like you to meet my husband, Elliot. Elliot, this is Leland Kessler." Then she'd turn to me, drawing me into the conversation. "Elliot's just taken a new position with Harrington Consulting, specializing in financial services for nonprofits. They're actually a co-sponsor tonight." I watched, fascinated, as she effortlessly wove me into the fabric of her professional world. She wasn't just acknowledging my existence. She was highlighting my work, ensuring I was seen not as a mere accessory, but as a professional in my own right. She was proud of me, and she wasn't afraid to show it. It was a small but significant change that reflected her new understanding of what a true partnership looked like. Late in the evening, as one of the event's major sponsors, Corinne was asked to say a few words on behalf of Crestview. As she walked to the microphone, I felt a familiar pang of anxiety, a ghost of the past. She stepped into the spotlight with the same easy confidence she'd always possessed. But as she began to speak, I noticed a difference in her approach. "Community has always been at the heart of Crestview's mission," she began, her voice warm and clear. "Building connections, fostering growth. But I've learned recently, on a very personal level, that the most important community we have is the one that begins at home. It's the people who support us, day in and day out, who make everything else possible." Her eyes found mine in the crowd, and she offered a small, private smile that was just for me. "My husband, Elliot," she continued, and the name echoed in the quiet room, a direct and unequivocal acknowledgement, taught me that lesson. He taught me that our greatest accomplishments are never truly solo endeavors, but rather the product of the love, support, and partnership we receive from those closest to us. He is the foundation upon which my success is built. Thank you. And as polite applause filled the room, a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the scotch in my hand. It wasn't just that she had publicly acknowledged me. It was that I knew, with every fiber of my being, that she meant it. The words weren't for show. They weren't a correction of a past mistake. They reflected a genuine, hard-won shift in how she viewed our relationship and her place within it. On the drive home, a comfortable silence settled between us. The tension that used to hum beneath the surface of our quiet moments was gone. As we pulled into our driveway, her phone, which had been respectfully silent in her purse all evening, buzzed with an email notification. She glanced at it, and I saw her expression tighten almost imperceptibly. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up at me, a complex mix of emotions in her eyes. "It's Julian Croft. He wants to have dinner instead of meeting at the office next week to discuss the campaign Diane and I developed for his company." She held the phone up, showing me the screen. The message was casually worded, but the implication was clear. He says he prefers a more relaxed atmosphere for creative discussions. The old me would have tensed up, my stomach clenching with suspicion and insecurity. The new me was simply curious. I watched her, trusting her to handle it. "And what are you going to tell him?" I asked, my voice calm. Her thumb hovered over the phone's keyboard for a moment. Then, with a decisive series of taps, she typed and hit send. She turned the phone back to me so I could read her reply. "Julian, thanks for the invitation, but I'm only available for office meetings during business hours. Diane, who is managing your account now, and I would be happy to host you and your team at Crestview on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Let us know if that works. Best, Corinne." It was polite, professional, and absolutely immovable. "Diane is managing his account now?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "She is," Corinne confirmed, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips as she slipped the phone back into her purse. "I officially handed it over last week. My plate is full enough as it is." No, I felt a surge of pride in her, not because she needed my approval, but because she was upholding her own integrity, protecting the boundaries we had worked so hard to build. His response to that might affect that seven-figure account, I observed quietly. She shrugged, turning to look at me, her eyes clear and bright in the dim light of the car. "Maybe," she said, "but some things are more important than landing an account." I reached across the console and took her hand, our fingers lacing together in a familiar, comfortable way. The suit I was wearing was just a suit. The party was just a party. They were no longer symbols of my invisibility. Tonight, in front of a room full of her colleagues and peers, Corinne hadn't just given me a mention in a speech. She had given me back my name. And in doing so, she had shown me that our new foundation wasn't just a blueprint anymore. It was real, it was solid, and it was something we had built together. I was no longer the invisible man. I was her husband, and I was finally, truly, home.